It was supposed to be a standard episode of The Late Show, with Stephen Colbert on the evening of March 31st, 2025. Just another night of sharp satire, celebrity banter, and a carefully curated dose of liberal-leaning commentary. The guest was J.D. Vance, the Ohio senator, best-selling author of Hillbilly Elegy, and a figure who'd become a lightning rod in American politics. Known for his outspoken conservative views and his knack for stirring the cultural pot, Vance was booked to discuss his latest policy push on rural revitalization. But what unfolded instead was a confrontation so raw, so unscripted, and so explosive that it left the studio audience stunned, the internet ablaze, and the CBS production team scrambling to pick up the pieces. From the moment Vance stepped onto the stage, the energy in the Ed Sullivan Theater was off-kilter. The crowd, typically primed for Colbert's brand of irreverent humor, offered a smattering of polite applause mixed with an audible undercurrent of unease. Vance, dressed in a navy suit with a crisp white shirt and no tie, an everyman touch that clashed with the polished, late-night vibe, gave a tight smile and a wave before settling into the guest chair. Colbert, perched behind his iconic desk, greeted him with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. The host's usual playful warmth was replaced by a taut, almost predatory alertness. "Senator Vance, welcome to the show," Colbert began, his voice smooth, but edged with something sharper. "You've been making waves lately, some might say tidal waves in the Senate, and beyond. But let's cut through the noise. I want to talk about something that's been bubbling up around you, something people are calling troubling." Vance tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "I'm guessing you're not here to ask me about infrastructure funding," he quipped, earning a few hesitant laughs from the audience. Colbert didn't laugh. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, his trademark smirk flickering. "No, JD, I'm not. Let's talk about your comments on family values. You've been pretty vocal about traditional marriage, about the nuclear family being the bedrock of society. But then there's this clip going around from a podcast last month, where you said, and I'm quoting here, the left's obsession with dismantling gender roles is turning kids into guinea pigs for their social experiments. Care to elaborate?" The crowd shifted in their seats. Vance didn't flinch. "Sure, Stephen, I'll bite. What I said was about protecting kids. We've got a culture right now that's rushing to affirm every feeling a child has, no questions asked, even when it comes to life-altering decisions, like puberty blockers or surgeries. I think that's reckless. I think kids deserve time to figure themselves out without adults pushing them into permanent choices they might regret." Colbert's eyebrows shot up, and he pounced. "So you're saying kids exploring their gender identity is a social experiment? That's a pretty loaded term, Senator. Some might call it dismissive. Others might call it, oh, I don't know, transphobic." The word hung in the air, like a lit fuse. The audience let out a collective gasp, followed by a ripple of murmurs. Vance's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "You can slap whatever label you want on it, Stephen. I'm not afraid of the word police. I'm saying there's a difference between supporting kids and exploiting them. If you think questioning the rush to medicalize children is transphobic, then we're just not speaking the same language." Colbert leaned back, folding his arms. "Okay, let's shift gears then. Because it's not just gender stuff. You've also been pretty cozy with some far-right voices lately, people who've flirted with white nationalism, who've pushed anti-immigrant rhetoric. You've nodded along on platforms where folks say America's being invaded by outsiders. That's not just policy talk, JD. That's a worldview. Some say it's a dog whistle. What do you say?" Vance's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, a flicker of irritation crossed his face. "What I say is that's a cheap shot. I've spent my life talking about the people I grew up with, working-class folks who've been ignored, left behind by elites who don't care. If you want to twist that into some grand conspiracy about race or nationalism, that's on you. I'm not here to play your gotcha game." The audience was dead silent now, the usual late-night levity replaced by a tension so thick it felt like the room might crack. Colbert pressed on, his tone dropping into something colder. "Come on, JD, you're a smart guy, you know how this works. You pal around with certain voices, you amplify certain ideas, it sends a message, and then there's your take on abortion, calling it a moral tragedy but dodging the question of bans. People want to know, where do you really stand? Are you just pandering to the MAGA crowd, or do you actually believe this stuff? Then you're leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice low but cutting. You want to know where I stand? I stand with the people who don't have private jets and trust funds to fall back on. I stand with families who are scared their kids are being fed ideologies they don't understand. And yeah, I think abortion's a tragedy, because life matters. But you're not asking me this to understand, Stephen. You're asking to paint me as the villain in your little morality play. Colbert smirked, but it was brittle. Oh, I don't need to paint anything. You're doing a fine job yourself. Let's talk about your book. Hillbilly Elegy. You wrote about poverty, addiction, the struggles of Appalachia. But now you're a senator, rubbing elbows with billionaires, railing against coastal elites, while living pretty comfortably yourself. Some say you've sold out, that you're just another opportunist using a sob story to climb the ladder. How do you sleep at night? That hit a nerve. Vance's face hardened, and he sat up straighter. I sleep fine knowing I've never forgotten where I came from. You want to talk about opportunism? Let's talk about a guy who sits behind a desk every night, preaching to a choir of clapping seals, raking in millions while pretending he's the voice of the little guy. That's a hustle, Stephen. I'm just trying to fix what's broken. The crowd erupted. Some cheers, some boos, a chaotic mess of noise. Colbert's eyes widened, caught off guard by the jab. He recovered quickly, leaning in with a theatrical scoff. Clapping seals, huh? Cute. But let's not deflect. You're the one dodging here. You've built a brand on authenticity, but when push comes to shove, you sound like every other politician, vague platitudes. No accountability. Take a stand, JD. Are you anti-trans, anti-immigrant, anti-woman? Give us something real. Vance didn't blink. You want real? Here's real. I think the left's obsession with identity politics is tearing this country apart. I think we're so busy policing language and feelings that we've forgotten how to talk about jobs, schools, healthcare stuff that actually keeps a society running. You call that anti-whatever you want. I call it common sense. Colbert slammed his hand on the desk, a rare break in his polished facade. Common sense? That's a cop-out. You're not some folksy everyman anymore, Senator. You're a power player, and your words have weight. When you trash gender identity, when you cozy up to extremists, it's not just talk, it's a signal. People hear it. Kids hear it. And some of them get hurt. Vance shot back, his voice rising for the first time. And when you turn every disagreement into a witch hunt, you hurt people too. You think you're saving the world by shaming anyone who doesn't buy your script. But all you're doing is silencing half the country. That's not progress. That's control. The studio was a pressure cooker now. The audience didn't know whether to clap or gasp. The band, usually ready with a jaunty riff to cut the tension, stayed mute. Colbert's face flushed, and he pointed a finger at Vance. Silencing? You're on my stage. JD, you've got your megaphone, but you don't get to dodge the hard stuff, because it's inconvenient. Answer me this. Do you think trans kids deserve care, or are they just pawns in your culture war? The Nasu stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The move was so sudden that Colbert flinched. You want an answer? Fine. I think kids deserve love, protection, and time, not adults projecting their agendas onto them. But you don't care about my answer, Stephen. You care about the clip, the soundbite, the applause. This isn't a conversation, it's a trap. Colbert stood too, matching Vance's height across the desk. A trap? No, this is accountability. You're a public figure. You don't get to hide behind it's complicated when your words fuel division. Vance stepped closer, his voice dropping to a lethal calm. And you don't get to play judge and jury because you've got a desk and a laugh track. You invited me here to talk policy. You made it personal. So here's personal. You're part of a machine that thrives on outrage, not truth. And I'm done feeding it. With that, Vance turned and walked off stage, not storming, not rushing, just walking, deliberate and unflinching. The audience erupted into chaos, shouts, claps, boos, a cacophony of confusion. Colbert stood frozen, mouth half open, as the cameras swiveled wildly. Well, I guess that's a wrap, he stammered, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow. The screen cut to black, no music, no fade, just an abrupt, jarring end. The fallout was immediate and seismic. Within minutes, X was flooded with clips of the showdown, hashtags like Vance vs Colbert and show, hashtags like Vance vs Colbert and show, Colbert meltdown trending worldwide. On Reddit, rival threads battled for supremacy. JDS, Vance storms off after Colbert grills him on trans kids, versus Vance schools Colbert in epic smackdown. The internet split into warring camps, some hailing Vance as a truth teller who'd exposed late-night hypocrisy, others slamming him as a coward who couldn't handle the heat. Inside CBS, panic reigned. Producers huddled in a war room, fielding calls from furious sponsors and network execs. Colbert retreated to his dressing room, staring at a frozen frame of Vance walking away, back straight, face unreadable. He didn't even blink, Colbert muttered to his head writer, who nodded grimly. The PR team drafted a statement. Last night's segment with Senator Vance was an unfortunate escalation. It does not reflect the spirit of the Late Show. But the damage was done. Gaudes, meanwhile, didn't retreat. His team uploaded the full unedited clip to X within an hour, captioned simply, "The truth doesn't need a laugh track." It racked up 15 million views by morning. Sitting in a hotel room in New York, Vance watched the numbers climb, his phone buzzing with text from allies and aides. "They're calling it a disaster," one read. Vance typed back, "Good, let it burn." The next night, Colbert returned to the air, opening not with his usual monologue, but with a somber address. The stage was dim, the audience quiet. "Last night got messy," he said, looking straight into the camera. "I pushed hard." Senator Vance pushed back harder. "They stand by asking tough questions, but maybe I didn't leave enough room for answers. We're not here to agree, we're here to talk. And we'll keep talking." Across the country, jaws dropped. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't a double down either. It was something rarer, reflection. Vance responded on X, "Messy's where the real stuff lives. Respect for airing it out." The tweet hit 1 million likes in hours. The story didn't end there. A week later, the New York Times ran an op-ed by Vance's sister, Lindsay, titled "Behind the Noise." She wrote, "My brother's not perfect. He's stubborn, he's blunt, and he doesn't always say it pretty. But he's fighting for people he thinks are forgotten. Last night wasn't about winning, it was about surviving a world that stopped listening." It went viral, adding fuel to a debate that refused to die. By week's end, Vance was invited back, not to Colbert's desk, but to a live town hall, unscripted and unfiltered. He accepted. Colbert agreed to host. On April 11, 2025, they faced off again, not as foes but as two men wading through the wreckage of a culture at war with itself. The conversation was tense, raw and unfinished. When Vance said, "We won't agree, but we're still here," the crowd roared, not in victory, but in relief. No one won. No one lost. But something shifted. A crack in the echo chamber, a whisper of dialogue in the noise. And for once, that felt like enough.